Disclaimer. Judge Ron Rangel is providing this podcast and website for educational purposes only, as well as to give the public general information regarding topics related to the criminal justice system. The views, thoughts, and opinions of his guest speakers are the speaker's own and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of Judge Rangel. All rise. You are now listening to Beyond the Gavel with Judge Ron Rangel, educating the public and expanding mindsets. Subscribe on our website, beyondthegavelpodcast.com, or your favorite podcast platform for more of the latest podcast episodes and updates.
Welcome to Beyond the Gavel with Judge Ron Rangel. I'm your host. This is a new year. We took a bit of a hiatus at Beyond the Gavel. First of all, we had the holidays. Hope everyone had a wonderful and safe holiday season. Second of all, I got COVID. I got COVID-19 for the very first time in my life. And I got to tell you, I got a newfound respect for those that have gone through the process. In the studio, we have Councilwoman Marina Alderete Gavito. Now, Marina was elected to the San Antonio City Council for District 7 in June of 2023. Prior to becoming a council member, Marina served as the executive director of SA Digital Connects, an organization focused on addressing the digital divide in San Antonio and in Bexar County. Now, in this capacity, Marina focused on implementing the community's digital plan and partnered with the public and the private sectors, as well as over 200 community organizations to activate on this issue. Now, before she joined that organization, Marina's career focused on tech and innovation for Fortune 500 corporations. She is also the founding executive director of TechBlock and successfully advocated for rideshare while increasing membership to over 5,000 plus individuals. Marina is a San Antonio native and uses her influence to innovate, to change, and to drive results to continue to help improve this community. And of the utmost importance, Marina and her husband, George, are focused on raising their two young daughters, Marielle and Giselle Gavito. Welcome, Councilwoman.
Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you coming on. You know, I got to say, I know your dad. We mentioned him just a brief moment ago, Joe Alderete.
Yeah.
He is an awesome individual. I've always enjoyed working with him, and I can see the work that he's done with you.
Yeah, well, and he thinks very highly of you as well.
Thank you. Now, it's a new year. This is the first episode of 2024. Sometimes people come into these things and say, I got a new resolution. I'm going to do something different this year. I'm going to do something better. Anything for you? Anything that you came up with?
In terms of resolutions, no, because I think that any day can be day one. So
every day is a new day.
Yeah.
You know, for me, I lost my dad in 2023. I was very blessed to have him in my life. And one of the things that he always told me, the advice that he always gave me was, doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter where you come from, doesn't matter what you've achieved. Without good health, you have nothing.
That's true.
So for me, I'm going to focus on improving my health.
Nice. You could join me for a run.
You let me know, and I will definitely give it a shot. I can't say I'll keep up. Let's talk a little bit about your election. I know you got elected last year to the city council. Congratulations on that. What is it like? What is it like to be a San Antonio city councilwoman?
Well, so far so good. So I'm right at around 6 months into the role. You know, right after the election, we went straight into budget season. So that was a lot of learning and it was a lot of long hours, but we were able to get the District 7 requests into the budget. So we had a really successful budget season. But, you know, also just coming off the grind of a campaign, you know, we block walked a ton. And so I had that firsthand knowledge of what was important to residents. I personally knocked on over 4,000 doors. So I had a lot of great perspective on what was most important to residents of District 7.
I have a lot of respect for anybody that puts in the time and the effort to represent our community. Since you've been a councilwoman, has there been any things that have surprised you as to the work, the kind of representation that you would have to do?
You know, no surprises. This is what I expected it to be. And actually, I mean, I love the work. You know, I think that we're so close to the residents' daily lives and we have so much impact on the residents' daily lives that I guess I'm more in love with the work that I thought I would be.
So when you talk about the work, just for folks that don't completely understand what a city council person does, what does a daily look at your life look like related to representing folks in District 7?
There's a lot of meetings. There's a lot of prep for meetings. What excites me the most is the interactions with residents, you know, whether it's at community events, whether it's talking to neighborhood presidents on the phone about what's concerning them. In February, my team and I are actually going to start block walking again. We're not going to come around just on campaign season, but come around their doors now and say, hey, what's important to you? And also, FYI, we're here to support you with whatever you need. So every day is a little bit different. City council meetings are on Thursday and they're pretty formal. But other than that, it's a lot of the grind of making sure that we're supporting our District 7 residents and residents all over the city how best we can.
Sometimes folks don't know that. Sometimes folks have a concept that those within the system don't really have an understanding as to what it is they're going through.
Right. Our office gets several calls and emails daily on things that are important to residents. Our office gets several calls and emails daily about different requests that neighbors need, whether it's a code compliance issue, whether it's a street issue, whether it's loose dogs, and so staying on top of the calls, the emails, social media, and just making sure that we're supporting residents wherever they are.
I used to live in District 7. I just moved out of that district not too long ago. And doing the block walking, knocking on those doors, talking to the constituents, going to these neighborhood association meetings and other related groups, what kind of issues have you found constituents seem to be most concerned about?
Pretty quickly into block walking that I could see that safety and security was their top priority. They wanted to feel safe and secure in their neighborhoods, and whether it was people on trailways, the increase in homeless encampments, whether it's speeding, or whether it was police shootings, there was reasons that they weren't feeling safe and secure. The second biggest priority that I heard from them was about infrastructure, right? So stop signs, speed bumps, that kind of stuff, or hey, the street's in really bad shape and we need to get it fixed. The third priority I heard from residents was about transparency and accountability. Oftentimes they do see city council in these formal meetings. So it was very important for me and our team to be over communicative with what we're doing, whether it's us doing a video every week on what we're discussing at City Hall, to our newsletters and our emails, we're letting them know everything that's going on.
So as it relates to public safety, that's something that I hear quite a bit about. You mentioned infrastructure. It's always good for people to recognize that there's a lot of different jurisdictions that deal with these kind of issues. And I'll give you a quick example. I was at a neighborhood association meeting not too long ago with one of your predecessors, and she was being attacked for some weeds that were on the side of a highway embankment. Mm-hmm. And she said, hey, that is a Department of Public Safety type jurisdiction because it's a highway.
Yeah.
Do you deal with issues like that?
All the time. Yeah. And it is frustrating because District 7 encompasses two suburban cities, Leon Valley and Balcones Heights. So whether they're seeing graffiti on a wall and it's in Leon Valley or, overgrowth on the medians on Bandera, they're calling us about it. But our team is still pretty diligent about working with our partners at TxDOT at Leon Valley and Balcones Heights to address the concerns. So even though it's not in our jurisdiction, we kind of go above and beyond to address it for them.
And that is related to public safety.
Mm-hmm.
In the system on the county side, we have lots of different elected public officials, a lot of folks that represent people in the different capacities that they have. As it relates to being on city council, how is it that you're able to address some of these public safety concerns with some of your constituents?
One of the things was it was a priority for me to be on the public safety committee, and so I advocated for that and luckily got appointed by the mayor to be on that committee. And so there I could hear firsthand what we're doing and ask the tough questions that our residents are asking me. And so I was really happy about that. But I know that even outside of the public safety committee, it's going to take a lot of collaboration with, city partners, county partners, with our police, with our DA's office. It's all of us working together to keep our residents safe.
So what kind of stuff does the city public safety committee look at?
Yeah, the most pressing things are police and fire. Right now in the last week's public safety committee meeting, they talked about the crime stats for 2023. And so we're able to probe and ask questions. Obviously when fire data becomes available, we look at that too. But one of the things that I've been mentioning is that there are other reasons why people don't feel safe. Loose and dangerous dogs in their neighborhood, is a big one. And that causes people to feel unsafe when walking their kids at night or, an after dinner walk. Also, the increased amount of homeless encampments, where people aren't able to take the same streets that they used to take because it's filled with encampments or whatever, or when they're hearing horrific stories about violence on the Greenway trails, that impacts them in their daily lives. So I feel that those are also public safety issues as well.
A lot of things I think are related to the fact that we live in a 24-hour news cycle.
Yeah,
Right.
I
So
agree.
the statistics go up and they go down. Overall, it's been pretty constant in terms of violent crime and other types of crime that are committed within the city. What kind of responses have you had from individuals related to their fears and the things that really scare them?
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I do feel that when people are kind of pent up in their house, and they're watching the news or maybe getting their news from Facebook, they're kind of thinking, "Oh my God, the world's falling apart," and it really isn't. There's a lot of great things going on outside, and so it's just this perception, and I do agree with you. I think it's because media is at a 24-hour cycle that there's going to be a large fair share of it being negative and scary news.
That's the good and bad with technology. We got to take the good and the bad. There was something that I read not too long ago regarding the city contracting with UTSA.
Mm.
Now, as you know, I teach at UTSA.
Mm-hmm.
I love the school. We just started school this past week. We got great students that went there. Alana was one of my former students. But as it relates to the study that UTSA is doing, what is it specifically that y'all are looking for when y'all contracted with them?
Right. So they're helping us with a couple of different things. First is that hotspot policing that you may have heard about, where focusing on police presence in high crime areas, and the data that's been coming back from that so far has been very positive.
It's always good to see UTSA involved in these kind of studies. I've been dealing with them as it relates to trying to shore up and build some of the neighborhoods around the central part of the city. And so I'm very proud of the university in terms of what they're doing. Now, related to public safety, what do you think about the public safety action plan that the city and the county have put together in the last couple of days?
I think it's great. I mean, I do have some questions to discuss. I think it's great. And finally, we're seeing this level of collaboration that's been sorely needed.
Yeah, and just so the folk that are listening understand, not everybody's from San Antonio. We do have listeners in probably every state
Yeah.
in the United States and lots of listeners outside of our country. In San Antonio, we had a spate of police officer-involved shootings where individuals that were accused of crimes fired at police officers. And so that caused some conversation within the community about doing things to make sure that the community is kept safe. And so as a result of some of these things, there were some high profile comments made by certain public officials within our community. The mayor reached out to me, asked me to be on a public safety committee. And then our county judge, Peter Sakai, reached out to me and did the same thing. And so we were able to come together. We had a series of meetings and we came up with a safety plan, which is what the councilwoman and I are talking about now. So as it relates to that plan, you did mention that you wanted to ask a couple of things.
Yeah, I think the first thing that stuck out to me was addressing the issue of violent offenders cutting off ankle monitors and posing a threat in the community.
When I first got involved, one of the things that I did, and I started this process when I first became a judge and got involved with policy. I interviewed a lot of folks within the system in all different types and parts of the system. And one of the things that I found is you have two different types of supervision. The first type is called pretrial services. When somebody gets arrested and they get released from custody while their case is pending, they go through a process called bail or bonds. And as a condition of that, sometimes there's conditions they have to follow. If they have to wear an ankle monitor, they have to be supervised 24 hours, 7 days a week. And so oftentimes people that are accused of violent crimes are, as a condition of supervision, required to stay away from certain locations or certain people or have maybe a curfew. And so that's being looked at and monitored. So if there's a violation, then we have magistrate judges within the system that can immediately set out a warrant for somebody's arrest or do some sort of enforcement of a violation of bail. Once somebody is put on probation, our local community supervision department is contracted with an organization that sends some sort of communication over to them when there's a violation. But nobody at probation looks at those things until the first business day after the violation has occurred. So let's say a few weeks ago, actually this past week, we had a very important holiday, Martin Luther King Jr. holiday. And so if somebody were to commit a violation of their probation, meaning they cut an ankle monitor off or they violated some sort of condition, the probation department wouldn't have access to that until Tuesday morning at 8:00. And so something that happened Friday night, Saturday night, that's a concern. So that's one of the issues that we address. And I think that's something that probation has indicated to us that they're going to resolve.
That's interesting. That type of stuff was still happening.
There are a lot of organizations involved when it comes to dealing with public safety. What are some of the things that you've had to deal with that has kind of surprised you, that is interesting to you, that is still happening in dealing with the public safety committee?
I mean, the biggest thing is it has been the lack of communication from the city and the county. I thought that, going into it, we would have been more collaborative, but when you were citing the police shootings, it was very apparent that lack of communication. So I'm glad that we're partnering now. It's unfortunate it took something horrific like those police shootings to spur it, but finally being on city council and seeing that breakdown in communication, I felt was surprising.
One of the things that I'm very proud about living in our community is the elected public officials that we have on both the city and the county side seem really concerned about improving the system.
Right.
That's a wonderful collaboration,
Yes.
a wonderful thing to see.
And it's something that, I will have frequent communication with County Commissioner Justin Rodriguez, and saying, hey, this is what we're seeing on our side. What are you seeing on your side and stuff, and just figure out where we can help on both sides.
And for those that live outside our community,
Yes.
the county commissioner is sort of like the individual that represents the county, like in your capacity, and that Justin Rodriguez's district is the same district as yours, or it overlaps your
They're
district.
overlapping, right?
That's
Yeah.
right.
So a lot of his residents are mine. And so, we see a lot of them coming to him or I with similar concerns and saying, hey, this is a problem, and then we'll figure out who can solve it.
So as a result of that, y'all collaborate,
Yeah.
y'all discuss these kind of issues.
Yeah,
Excellent.
right.
I think that's good for people to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an example of the county and the city working together.
Absolutely. I did have another question on establishing regular meetings between the city and the county leadership and stakeholder work groups. What are you seeing that would look like?
Anytime you deal with individuals that work within systems, there's always a power issue at play, right? And so one of the things that we talk about in academia is politics, political power. What exactly is politics? And politics is always about who's got the money, how the money is spent, where the money goes, and who's got the ability to make those kind of decisions. And so as a result of that, you always see different types of bureaucracies that are always angling for power in that particular way. One thing that I've seen with this collaboration, and we're dealing with this public safety plan, is we have the county and the city actually working together to figure out the best solutions that they can come up with. And so that's a really wonderful thing to see. I've had some opportunities to come in the past with folks that work with the city, and there always seems to be a dynamic where they're at odds with each other, the city and the county. This is really the first time I've seen them come together and say, what can we do as a whole to make this thing work? What can we do to make our community feel better about public safety?
Mm-hmm.
And so just the meetings in and of themselves has been great to see.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that when we get over the political dynamics and actually just work to collaborate to make our residents safer, that there will be so many advantages and benefits to the community.
And you can feel it when you go out, right?
Yeah.
That's one of the things which I really tried to make it a point for folks to understand that when you have individuals that work in public safety, it's important that they collaborate.
Right.
And if there's an issue, it's good to get together, have a cup of coffee, and just sort of discuss these things rather than throw out things in the media. Because obviously, any type of dispute that comes out publicly is going to be looked at, it's going to be scrutinized, it's going to be made available to the public. And that puts a lot of folks in the public at fear.
Right.
If you're an individual who's a victim of violent crime, you're not going to feel comfortable to communicate with the police or to talk to the DA's office to help yourself feel safe if you think that there's dysfunction in the system. So I think coming together does a lot to improve those relations.
Right. And that reminds me, we have done a couple of ride-alongs with our safe officers and our patrol officers. And it's always so enlightening to see what they go through, but also the little things that we as city council can do that can make their lives a whole lot easier. For instance, like one time we were looking at some homeless encampments up and down Bandera Road, and they were saying it's a nightmare to try and figure out who the owners are of these vacant buildings, or sometimes the owners live in other states, California or New York, so they don't really care that their vacant building is really wreaking havoc on a neighborhood, and so now our team is creating different policies to where we can hold owners of vacant buildings accountable to say, hey, you have to clean this up. Just because you're somewhere else, this isn't our community. And so we always get those nuggets by listening to our police officers of just different policy that makes sense that we could start implementing on our end.
That's a great program.
Yeah.
When I used to work for Child Protective Services, and I did a ride along as well.
Yeah.
I got so much out of that.
Right.
All right, Councilwoman, I'm enjoying this conversation. Let's do a quick Q&A break. We'll be right back.
This is Q&A with Judge Ron Rangel. Submit your question today at beyondthegavelpodcast.com.
Welcome to the Q&A break. We have a question. I saw the court scuffle on the news and heard your episode with Scott McCrum discussing the event. Why did it take so long for officers to respond? What is the procedure behind those circumstances? I also saw the court scuffle on the news. I was contacted by a couple of news outlets to give a comment or to give my perspective on what it is that occurred. One of the things that I noticed is that when the actual scuffle occurred, it took everybody in the courtroom by surprise. Now, I know it's easy to look back and see how things could have happened in a different way. So it took a few seconds for the judge to hit the panic button. It was a very good judge, Michael Mary, who was in court that day. He then removed himself from the courtroom as is required by protocol. Now, these things happen in real time. So in real time, there's always a little bit of a delay for the brain to register what's going on and for people to react. But when we see it on video, it seems like more time than usual passes. The reality of it was the folks within that courtroom handled it very well. They handled it very quickly. There were no serious injuries that happened in that courtroom. And so kudos to those that reacted and kept the public safe. Now, for those of you that are listening in, I was asked by one of my students a couple of days back about a scuffle that occurred in Las Vegas, Nevada, where a judge was attacked by an individual who she had just sentenced, jumped over the bench, and started beating on her. That's another situation that sort of reminds us it doesn't matter where we're at. We always have to be on top of these things to keep everyone safe. Learn from whatever it is that happens and continue to make the system a better place to be. That's an excellent question. Thank you so much for asking it. I enjoyed answering it. Let's get back to the show.
This is Q&A with Judge Ron Rangel. Submit your question today at beyondthegavelpodcast.com.
Welcome back. I'm here talking to Marina Alderete Gavito. What do you think City Council could do to help folks understand the difficulties? Because I know your job is very difficult.
Right.
You deal with a lot of individuals. I think you have one of those jobs like mine where people that don't understand the system, something doesn't go right in their minds, are going to automatically blame their city council person.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is always fascinating, where they feel city council has authority or doesn't have authority, or they just want someone to be mad at, so we do have to take the brunt end of a lot, but I let my team know that they're frustrated, and however we can channel that frustration to make change, whether it's listening. A lot of people just want to be heard, or figuring out, okay, there's a nugget here somewhere, in all their anger, there's a nugget here somewhere. So we just need to focus on that to truly understand where their frustration is and see if there's a way we can make a change.
You got to really be patient.
Yeah, it's a lot of patience.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and also though too, I mean, I think one of the things that I've been pretty vocal about with residents, whether they're on two sides of issues, they're saying, but I'm your resident and this is really bothering me. I'm letting them know, hey, it's a numbers game. I'm a representative. And so if I'm hearing, 50 people on one side of the issue versus 20 people on the other side of the issue like that, I have to take that into account too. So, and again, I think that all falls into transparency. I'm just letting them know what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing, but also appreciating people's engagement.
Educating folks.
Mm-hmm.
That's important.
Another question I had was, I think it's implementing a new software, Tyler Odyssey, to streamline the booking process. Can you tell me more about that?
When I first came into the county, I first got elected in 2008. Mm-hmm. So I just started my 16th year in this particular position. I still don't know how to use the computer system that we use. I have clerks that help me. I have a court coordinator, because we're still using a 1972 DAWS program within the entire justice system.
Wow.
It's a green screen. You got to put in a code for every single thing. And so some of these folks have these codes memorized and they can type these things very quickly, but it's very difficult to read.
Yeah.
And so what we started doing, I was in a committee several years ago where we reached out to a bunch of different software organizations. We had a contract with Tyler Odyssey. They then have started to implement a plan, and it's already partially implemented within the county. We should be fully on board by May of this year, over almost 2.5 years later than it should have been implemented.
Wow.
Now, this particular system ties all the different parts of the justice system together. It's sort of like Windows for the justice system. But until that's implemented, judges really don't have the capacity to look beyond what's going on in front of them. And it's very difficult to communicate with individuals like the sheriff,
Right.
with the clerks, and with other parts of the infrastructure that are very important and very necessary to collaborate with to make sure that these things are done.
Yeah.
That's an excellent question.
Yeah, and it's, coming from the tech industry, it's, we're always very much about how technology has to work for you. And, when it doesn't, I mean, it can really just break down so much communication.
One thing that's interesting that a lot of folks don't understand is that we would be in court, and this happens all the time. We're in court, we're getting ready to have a really big trial, and the DA's office will say, we just got information this morning from the police department that's very important in this trial that we are going to turn over to the defense now. The defense says, we're now looking at 150 videos that we have not had an opportunity to review because we got this today, got a jury panel outside in the hall. Judge, we need some more time. We need at least a month to review these hours and hours of video. And folks ask, how did this happen? It was interesting to find out that the evidence sharing capacities between SAPD and the DA's office was not compatible. So a lot of the stuff that the police department would input into the system to share with the DA's office would never get downloaded because of that incompatibility.
Wow.
So as a result of that, it would take some major investigating on each and every case from the DA's office to figure out there's a lot of stuff here that we don't have. And then they would have to physically walk over to SAPD, pick up physical documents or discs or whatever the case may be to then provide copies over to the defense in trials. Not only was the system within the county outdated, but also the systems between the law enforcement agencies were incompatible. That's something I think a lot of folks didn't understand was going on.
I'm glad that we're fixing it.
Yes.
Because, I have heard a lot of frustration from our police officers where, they're putting their lives on the line to go and get a criminal, and then it's just like, hey, nothing happens, and so just hearing that frustration and knowing, again, the tough job that they have of putting their life on the line every single day to keep all of us safe is it's frustrating. We want to keep our police officers safe too, but seeing the communication breakdown in software system is, I'm glad we're addressing it.
And it's a good point that you're making too, related to the role police agencies and the DA's office, right? So a police officer is, generally speaking, going to a scene to keep us safe. And we appreciate that.
Right.
So sometimes in keeping us safe, what they're required to do is to remove somebody or make an arrest.
Right.
That's a very important function in our society. However, the DA's office's function is to be able to prove a certain case in court. And so sometimes their perspective is, we recognize the value of removing this person from the scene, but in terms of evidence and proving beyond a reasonable doubt in front of 12 jurors, it's going to be difficult with what we have. And so as a result of that, I think the two sides really needed to communicate to recognize the stresses that each side has. Because being a police officer, being a prosecutor, those are difficult jobs. And we ask a lot of those individuals.
Right.
And it's always good to recognize that they're doing the best that they can.
Absolutely. I wonder too if we've looked at what other cities are doing and seeing how they're doing it much better and what we could learn from.
I think that's always important. And I think what's important for folks that are listening to understand is that we are often a model in Bexar County for other communities.
Okay.
I know that a lot of communities have contacted me with how we handle our system, how we run our jury process. And I also know that in a very positive way. As we've been discussing these public safety issues, you mentioned loose dogs and problems regarding dogs that are roaming our community. What's the issue with that?
Yeah, I mean, at the core of it, we have way too many loose and dangerous dogs in our community. Obviously, we've seen some of the horrific events that have happened with dogs killing or severely hurting people, our residents. And it's a huge issue. I mean, one, I think we need to get to the crux of the issue and be able to spay and neuter our dogs. There's not a lot of good options right now to spay and neuter your dogs that's available and it's low cost. So that's what keeps a lot of people away from fixing their dogs. I also think too it's the culture of letting your dog out of the fence. Oh, we'll roam out around throughout the day and then come back later. ACS picks up, well, 93% of the dogs that Animal Care Services picks up are owned dogs. So they're somebody's dogs. They're not even stray dogs. And so to me, it's a huge waste of taxpayer dollars where our Animal Care Service patrol officers are picking up a dog just to take it home, cite the person, probably pick up that dog 2 weeks later. I feel that's a huge waste. One of the things we're also going to be working with our statewide elected officials on is that in Texas, dogs are seen as property. And so because of that, Animal Care Services can't spay or neuter the dogs they pick up. All other states, their animal care services or their animal control services function can fix these dogs. They pick them up and then they spay or neuter them. Here we don't. And I think it exacerbates the issue and large amount of dogs that we see out in our community.
I remember some years back, there was a campaign regarding getting your pets chipped, wherein the owner could be identified and then they could be taken to wherever they need to go. Is that something that's going on? Is there some program related to that?
Yeah, they're still doing programming about chipping your animals, but also vaccinating your animals. But really, we need to also spay and neuter the dogs. One of the things that we were able to advocate for in the last budget season was a spay and neuter clinic near District 7. We're looking for kind of on the border of District 7, District 5, and different District 1, partly because we have District 5 and District 1 are two of the districts that have the highest amount of dog-related injuries, and we see a high amount of calls in District 7 on loose dogs in the neighborhood. People dump them at Woodlawn Lake. I've seen that firsthand. And so we need to get control of the issue. And so we're working very closely with Animal Care Services, meeting with them once a month and saying, hey, where are we at on this? And in the last budget cycle, we were able to get them a 26% budget increase so that they could do the job they need to do. And I was really pushing for more boots on the ground, right? We need more ACS patrol officers picking up these dogs. Recently, the city just released a dangerous dog map so that way people can see if their kids walking to school, hey, don't go down this street because there's a dangerous dog there, and also too, neighbors can keep an eye on that owner who has a dangerous dog to make sure that the dog's muzzled. If they're walking it, they have to have like an orange collar, they have to be marked as a dangerous dog.
How does the city define what a dangerous dog is?
Well, a lot of people think it has to do with the dog's breed, but it doesn't. It's really marked as dangerous based off of an attack or an incident that happened with that dog.
We're talking about District 7 and the constituents that you have. Where exactly is District 7 as it relates to the map?
Yeah, so District 7 kind of goes from the Woodlawn Lake, Jefferson, Monticello area, and then it goes all the way up, Inspiration Hills, then follows Bandera Road all the way up past 1604. So it's a pretty big district, a lot of different socioeconomic levels, a lot of different infrastructure needs. We'll see some parts of the district have a lot of drainage issues. Some parts of the district have a lot of dog issues, or speeding kind of happens everywhere. It's all over the city right now, but it's an interesting district. I'm honored to serve it.
So it's sort of west, northwest San Antonio. And then you mentioned that you border other municipalities. There are 23 municipalities in Bexar County. Is that about right?
I think so.
San Antonio being the largest.
Yeah.
So my thought as it relates to your job on city council and public safety, a lot of that would relate to budgets and looking at police and fire budgets. What is it exactly that y'all are looking at when you're thinking about public safety?
As I mentioned earlier, as soon as I got elected, we went straight into budget season. And again, hearing from the residents how much safety and security was a priority for them, that's what I went and pushed over into the budget. And so was able to partner with my council colleagues, and we were able to push enough budget through so that our SAPD could hire 117 new police officers, 105 of them being patrol officers. But what that does is it keeps our safe community officers in their neighborhoods longer. And our safe officers, one of the things I've learned on being on the campaign trail is how much residents love their safe officers. They can call them, hey, this is going on. It's this neighbor again. And so keeping those safe officers in the neighborhoods is key, and not having to pull those safe officers for different projects or to be on patrol. So we were happy to get that done. Also, one of the other things that we did was fully fund our SA core team. Our SA core team is the one that handles like mental health calls. And we saw that they only had, I believe, 2 or 3 shifts, but we were able to fund them so that they were able to be responsive to calls 24/7. And just to be clear, SAFE stands for San Antonio Fear-Free Environment. But these are really our community officers that are, again, embedded in the neighborhoods. They know all the streets, they know all the neighbors, and neighbors come to rely on the relationship they have with them.
So they develop that relationship wherein they can come into neighborhood association meetings and report on what's going on. Essentially, a liaison with the community and SAPD.
Yeah, and I do feel that seeing how San Antonio does it, where we have such a close relationship with our community officers, that's policing done right, because they come to trust this officer. They come to rely on them. And, we are at neighborhood association meetings with them all the time. They just have firsthand knowledge of what's going on in that neighborhood, which is, just means a lot to residents.
A few years back, I remember having a conversation with some folks on city council, and we were talking about mental health needs and the use of psychiatrists or counselors or therapists that would accompany police officers when they're called on some of these family violence calls.
Right.
Are you familiar with any of that?
Yeah. We've had residents have meetings with our office and saying, hey, I was having a mental health episode and the police came and maybe it wasn't as helpful. So I'm glad that our SA core team is now here and available for our residents.
What does the SA core team do?
So our SA core team responds to mental health calls, and they send a team of 3, a police officer, a paramedic, and a mental health professional. And they team up to be able to help that resident however is best.
Yeah, and that's important, right? Because there's always a delicate balance between law enforcement, making sure the community is safe, but at the same time, working with individuals to rehabilitate and to become better functioning member of society. So including all 3 to me seems very important.
Right. And so for us, it was extremely important that the team gets staffed 24/7 because the calls are coming in day and night, and we wanted to make sure that at any time of the day, they were being handled appropriately.
All right, let's go ahead and shift gears a little bit, Councilwoman. I know you have a demanding job. You have a lot of folks that rely on you for communication. What do you do to relax? I can imagine, we talked earlier how you're married, you have some kids. What do y'all do to unwind?
So I am one of those 5 a.m. workout weirdos, so I go and have a pretty grueling workout 5 a.m. most mornings. And that's just how I like to start my day and de-stress. I'm also a runner. So, running, and before the council sessions on Thursday, I make sure to go out for a run to think through things for the day. But also too, being a mom and spending time with my family is extremely important to me. I'm pretty bullish on protecting my Sundays so that I could have just a day to reset with them. We get a lot of event requests for Sundays, but I try to make sure that I just have a full day for my family. But also too, mom is my number 1 job. So, I make sure that I'm there for my girls for these important events.
That's important.
Mm-hmm.
You always want to look back and make sure that your children are happy and healthy and appreciative of everything going on.
Yeah. And also too, I think one of the things I do is I take my girls with me to a lot of neighborhood meetings and community events. I'm a working mom, and they see that, and some people appreciate that component. But also, I would say probably most importantly is that it lends itself to really good conversations. My oldest and I were at a community event for grandparents raising grandkids, and the District 7 office donated a lot of backpacks and school supplies for that. So when we were leaving that event, she's just like, Mom, why would grandparents be raising grandkids? And so it opened itself up for that type of conversation, which we were able to talk through. Or she knows that we're working on things with our homeless, and trying to connect them to help and resources. It opens those conversations up and also gives her perspective.
It's important to recognize that those that are less fortunate in our society don't really have that love and support of their families, of their
Right.
communities. I always feel blessed when I think about my parents and my
Yeah.
brothers. That's great.
Yeah.
Councilwoman, I've really enjoyed talking to you today.
Thank you. Thanks. And I'm really looking forward to the continued collaboration with the county so that way we could, work together to keep our residents safe. And thanks so much for all your work on this action plan, the public safety action plan. There's so many great suggestions, and I think we're all moving in the right direction.
We've reached the end of this episode. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back in 2 weeks.
You've been listening to Beyond the Gavel with Judge Ron Rangel. Join us in the next 2 weeks where we are educating the public and expanding mindsets. Head to our website, beyondthegavelpodcast.com, or your favorite podcast platform to subscribe to the latest episodes and updates.